Mr. Cohen is set to publicly testify before the House Oversight and Reform Committee on Wednesday. Washington. Michael D. Cohen plans to tell Congress on Wednesday that President Trump is a con man and a cheat who knew a longtime advisor was communicating with WikiLeaks, and who implicitly instructed Mr. Cohen to lie about a Trump Tower project in Moscow that was underway during the 2016 presidential campaign. The extraordinary testimony will take place when Mr. Cohen, the president's former lawyer and fixer, publicly appears before the House Oversight and Reform Committee. An advance copy of Mr. Cohen's testimony was obtained Tuesday night by reporters at multiple news organizations, including the New York Times, just as Mr. Trump began meetings in Vietnam before convening with the North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un. Mr. Cohen and his lawyer and advisor, Lanny J. Davis, did not immediately reply to requests for comment. In a statement earlier Tuesday, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the White House press secretary, condemned Mr. Cohen as a disgraced felon. "It's laughable that anyone would take a convicted liar like Cohen at his word, and pathetic to see him given yet another opportunity to spread his lies," she said. In vivid and at times tortured language, Mr. Cohen plans to use his opening remarks to unspool a narrative laced with regret of his decade working alongside Mr. Trump, including episodes during the 2016 campaign that are believed to be at the center of investigations by the special counsel, Robert S. Mueller III, and federal prosecutors in New York. The testimony underscores many of the unsavory themes and stories that have recurred in public reporting about Mr. Trump. He inflates his wealth, makes racist remarks, threatens his enemies and tries to bend the law to his favor, but puts them on the record, under oath, in the voice of a man who was one of Mr. Trump's closest aides. "I am ashamed that I chose to take part in concealing Mr. Trump's illicit acts rather than listening to my own conscience," Mr. Cohen plans to say. "I am ashamed because I know what Mr. Trump is. He is a racist. He is a con man. He is a cheat." But there are also more perilous claims that could further highlight Mr. Trump's potential legal exposure in the investigations that have already ensnared Mr. Cohen and other Trump associates. Mr. Cohen's testimony before the Oversight Committee will be his first in public before Congress, but he has already spent more than 70 hours with Mr. Mueller's investigators and with federal prosecutors in New York investigating a scheme hatched in the run-up to the 2016 election to make hush money payments to a pornographic film actress who claimed to have had an affair with Mr. Trump. Mr. Cohen and his account will be subjected to deep scrutiny by Republicans, who have already begun to hammer away with questions about his past business dealings and credibility. They plan to use Wednesday's hearing to paint Mr. Cohen as self-centered and untrustworthy, a man who ran afoul of the law, including by lying to Congress once before, and then once he was caught, sought to spin lies about his former boss to reduce his time in prison. Mr. Cohen will address his own past lies head-on and plans to use documents to try to bolster certain claims. He plans to draw a picture of Mr. Trump using the type of nonspecific directives more often associated with organized crime bosses than with American presidents. "In conversations we had during the campaign, at the same time I was actively negotiating in Russia for him, he would look me in the eye and tell me there's no business in Russia and then go out and lie to the American people by saying the same thing," Mr. Cohen plans to say. "In his way, he was telling me to lie." He will add, "Mr. Trump did not directly tell me to lie to Congress. That's not how he operates, Mr. Cohen also plans to say that Mr. Trump's personal lawyers approved his testimony, suggesting that they signed off on him telling a false version of events to the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. Mr. Cohen is meeting with both committees again in private this week in part to correct those earlier false statements. Mr. Trump knew of and directed the Trump-Moscow negotiations throughout the campaign and lied about it, Mr. Cohen will say. He lied about it because he never expected to win the election. He also lied about it because he stood to make hundreds of millions of dollars on the Moscow real estate project. What Mr. Trump said to Mr. Cohen has emerged as a central question, after the website BuzzFeed reported last month that Mr. Mueller had evidence that the president had personally directed his former lawyer to lie about the project when he testified before Congress in 2017. Mr. Mueller's office called the report inaccurate. Mr. Cohen's account under oath will state that something took place, but not that Mr. Trump made an overt directive. Mr. Cohen will also tell Congress that Mr. Trump had advance knowledge through his longtime advisor Roger J. Stone, Jr. that WikiLeaks would publish hacked emails that would damage his opponent, Hillary Clinton. In July 2016, days before the Democratic convention, I was in Mr. Trump's office when his secretary announced that Roger Stone was on the phone. Mr. Trump put Mr. Stone on the speakerphone, his written remarks say. Mr. Stone told Mr. Trump that he had just gotten off the phone with Julian Assange and that Mr. Assange told Mr. Stone that, within a couple of days, there would be a massive dump of emails that would damage Hillary Clinton's campaign. Mr. Trump responded by stating to the effect of, "Wouldn't that be great?" Mr. Stone, who was recently indicted on charges that include witness tampering and false statements to Congress, has denied to reporters that such a conversation took place. The recent indictment against him made no mention of such a conversation, but it did state that a senior campaign official was directed to contact Mr. Stone around that period of time about what material WikiLeaks had. And Mr. Cohen will reference a conversation he claims to have observed between the president's eldest son, Donald Trump Jr., and his father, which he believes happened around the time of a planned meeting with a Russian lawyer promising dirt on Hillary Clinton. He does not claim to have heard a direct reference to the meeting. Instead, Mr. Cohen will say, he recalled this event after the Times revealed the June 2016 meeting had taken place.